The date is January 31st, 1990. Let's say you are a citizen in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, aka the Soviet Union, aka Russia. And on this brisk day, you realize you need a break from all the debate whether the Soviet Union will collapse, the independence movements and rebellions in the Western regions, the political instability, and the Cold War. So what do? Well, why not get yourself a delicious Big Mac at the first ever McDonald's in the Soviet Union? You're going to have to wait a while, however, as there seems to be a line stretching for blocks, as it's all worth it to see whether your capitalist counterparts of the West really do have some sense of culture. Under the reigning General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet Union has gone under many reforms which have caused praise and controversy among the nation. At this point, the Iron Curtain seemed to be dismantling, as Western companies snuck their way through to expose capitalism into communist Russia. Because of Gorbachev's many reforms, people have put blame on him for the collapse of the Soviet Union, with the new Moscow McDonald's surely being a reason. But how did we get to a point where 30,000 people were being served in one day at a McDonald's in the Soviet Union? And what did this have to do with the dissolution of the Soviet Union? Well, let's find out. Let's start from the beginning. The Soviet Union was founded in 1922 when Vladimir Lenin led his Bolshevik people to overthrow a politically unstable government during a world war and after the abdication of the Russian throne by Tsar Nicholas II. After the October Revolution by the Bolsheviks, Russia fell into a bloody 5-year civil war between the Red Bolshevik Army versus the white anti-communist forces. The Reds came out on top, establishing a new government called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Lenin would take the reins as their first leader as he sought to implement Marxism into Russia, otherwise known as communism. Under this system, the economy of the Soviet Union would be based on state ownership of the means of production, such as farming and manufacturing. This means the government controlled what happens in the economy, which is also called a planned or command economy. However, Lenin unfortunately died in 1924, which put Joseph Stalin in power, meaning Stalin would lead his own version of economic planning instead of Lenin's vision. Stalin sought to rapidly industrialize the agrarian Russians in order to be on par with the industry of the West, which would soon help as Nazi Germany invaded Russia in World War II. The endless resources of the Russian land would formidably push back the Germans all the way to Berlin, causing their surrender. Due to the Red Army's counteroffensive all across Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union would absorb East Germany, East Berlin, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and Albania into the Union. The absorption of even more Soviet power put the Western nations in a very anxious state, especially the United States, as the Cold War would soon come into effect. Europe post-World War II was essentially split into two sections, the capitalist zone and the communist zone. The border between this divide would be widely known as the Iron Curtain. Under the Iron Curtain, Western goods such as cars, food, machinery, and companies were limited or non-existent in the Soviet Union. Though the Soviet Union seemed to be self-sufficient with its great resources and trade with welcoming countries, their people weren't doing so well under the Soviet system. The USSR's GDP was promising in the mid-century. However, the Soviet government was strongly emphasizing military and defense spending, as nuclear bomb tests and space exploration programs took a great majority of the USSR's revenue, leaving the people in below average and poor conditions. Berlin during this time is a good example of how people felt of the divide. After World War II, Berlin was occupied by the Allies and split into two parts. The West would be controlled by the US, UK, and France, while the East belonged to the Soviets. Berliners could openly move between the occupied zones, meaning residents could witness and experience the capitalist West Side and the communist East Side. West Berlin seemed to attract more people, as people could experience new technologies and fun cultures the West could offer, while the East was struggling to keep up. Mass migration to the West was deeply concerning the Soviet Union. So as they realized they could do anything with their part of the city, Soviet officials ordered barriers to be put up on the east-west border, and eventually, a wall would be put up to keep all East Berliners from moving to the West. The Berlin example could be described all throughout the Soviet Union as well. The Soviet head of state after Stalin, Nikita Khrushchev, did seek some reforms, but he was soon replaced by Leonid Brezhnev. Brezhnev sought to decentralize the economy slightly to focus on more market-based reforms, which eventually led to an economic spark in the Soviet economy. However, the economy still remained a command economy, and that spark they saw would not last too long. The 1970s became a breaking point for the Soviet Union as multiple factors plunged their economy into stagnation, such as poor bureaucratic decision-making, the OPEC oil crisis, corruption, lacking natural resources, and massive military spending, especially as the Soviet Union launched a major invasion into Afghanistan, sparking a 10-year war. The stagnation crippled Soviet living standards as well, with shortages and inadequacies of food and consumer goods. Both officials and people of the Soviet Union knew the country needed fixing and new reforms, as the very existence of this union was hanging by a thread. Changes seemed to be imminent as in 1982, Leonid Brezhnev died, which put Yuri Andropov in power. Finally, the Soviet people could witness new reforms to help change their economy, but Andropov died 15 months later. Okay, so now the people could put their hopes in Konstantin Chernenko to revitalize the greatness of the Soviet Union, and nope, he also died a year later. So again, a new leader rose that wasn't old as hell, and his name was Mikhail Gorbachev. Immediately, Gorbachev sought political and economic reforms as he would emphasize certain political slogans. The most notable ones the Russians saw were glasnost and perestroika. First, glasnost translates to openness or transparency, and a problem Gorbachev witnessed throughout his life is that Russians could never speak out against the government under Stalin, Khrushchev, and Brezhnev, or explore other countries, leaving the people repressed. So under the glasnost, Gorbachev encouraged the people to be more critical of leaders, let media be more free to express content, loosen travel restrictions, and uncensored controversial information. Perestroika, on the other hand, translates to restructuring. This is where some Soviet hardliners found concern of Gorbachev. Gorbachev saw that it was difficult for people to work if they were not happy or motivated, especially with looming imprisonment for speaking out, so multiple economic reforms were put into place to fit a more free market approach into the socialist system, like what Deng Xiaoping had been doing over in China. So with a lack of repression for speaking out towards the government and an openness to the world market, both the world and the Russian people sought an opportunity to experience new changes, which finally brings us to how McDonald's fits into all of this. Since the Soviet Union now would accept more foreign trade and markets, American companies saw the opportunity to invest in the untapped market of Soviet Russia. But McDonald's wasn't the first notable market to tap Russia. One time when then Vice President Richard Nixon was in Russia, he met with Khrushchev and got into a heated debate over capitalism and communism. To ease the tensions, a Pepsi executive was there to offer Khrushchev a taste of the mysterious carbonated sugar drink. He actually loved it and promoted it, catching the eye of both the Russian people and officials. Sometime later, the Soviet Union began trading with PepsiCo. However, the Soviet currency, the ruble, was essentially useless in the foreign markets, so they couldn't just buy the Pepsi. Instead, they traded tons of vodka for tons of Pepsi concentrate to equalize the value. Vodka soon became a hit in the US, and Pepsi became a hit in the USSR. And more absurdly, they sought to trade again, but instead of trading vodka for Pepsi, the Soviet Union traded 17 military submarines and 3 warships for $3 billion worth of Pepsi. This trade actually made Pepsi the 6th largest military in the world at that time. That same Pepsi executive, Donald Kendall, claimed we're disarming the Soviet Union faster than the US government is. This is quite ridiculous, but even more American companies in Russia made the Soviet scene even more ridiculous. So now we're back to January 31st, 1990, and it's the opening day of the first McDonald's in Russia. The scene is pure pandemonium. Thousands of people were lined up, with a line that stretched for several blocks just to try the mysterious sandwich called a hamburger that was apparently amazing. But why? Why the strong curiosity? For most people here, this was the first time in their lives they could experience anything other than their own culture. It was a big deal for people that had witnessed the harsh rule of Stalin and the extreme tension of the Cold War. Many of us have that privilege of traveling to other countries and experiencing other cultures, but the people of the USSR were stripped of that privilege for decades. Getting a Big Mac at this McDonald's was even relatively expensive for most Russians, as average income for Russians was still quite low during this time. So they would even sacrifice their income for one Big Mac when that money could have bought them 7 to 9 loaves of bread. That's how desperate people were to experience a new lifestyle, and this was the mood for all of the Soviet Union and its satellite states. McDonald's was a huge success, and these long lines would not go away for a while. The fact that one McDonald's in Russia was so popular made the Russian people even more discouraged of the Soviet system. After the success of McDonald's, more companies entered Russia soon, like Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut was also very popular, so popular that Gorbachev was in a commercial for Pizza Hut once. This commercial is from 1997, well after the dissolution, but it still translates to pretty much what happened in the dissolution.
Это Горбачев.
Горбачев.
Это из-за него у нас в экономике бардак.
Да благодаря ему у нас новые возможности.
Это из-за него у нас политическая нестабильность.
Да благодаря ему у нас свобода.
Полный хаос.
Перспективы.
Политическая нестабильность.
Да благодаря ему у нас есть Pizza Hut.
За Горбачева!
За Горбачева!
За Горбачева!
Sometimes nothing brings people together like a nice hot pizza from Pizza Hut.
So, did companies like McDonald's and Pizza Hut really cause the fall of the Soviet Union? Well, of course not. It was definitely more complicated than that, but the theme of people's feelings toward these new changes should really be what's taken away from these fast food restaurant openings. The Russian people had been repressed from openness to the outside world and from contradicting their own government for decades, which is unimaginable for most people. It was only until Gorbachev came into power in the 80s when he allowed these freedoms under his reforms. So, McDonald's sure did help the Russians realize the Western culture was cool, unlike the system they were in, but if it wasn't for Gorbachev, there wouldn't be any McDonald's. Gorbachev knew his reforms would make his people happier. However, it inevitably fired back on him as people were free to criticize the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, and enough freedom and democratization to actually force Gorbachev to step down and bring in Boris Yeltsin. Along with Gorbachev's departure, the Berlin Wall was finally taken down, uniting Germany once more. The Soviet satellite states were departing from the Union, declaring independence, and the red hammer and sickle flag finally came down, bringing the old flag back in the Empire days. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union finally fell, ending the almost 70-year-long reign and arguably ending the Cold War. When analyzing why and how the Soviet Union fell, Mikhail Gorbachev should be the central figure of who we think helped spark that fall. Say what you want about him, whether he's a disgrace to communism by folding to liberalism, or a harbinger of peace and prosperity for reforming the Soviet Union, but I think most of us can agree he deserves credit for ensuring basic freedoms for his people and working for peace, helping end Western tensions and the Cold War. And most importantly, he gave his people a Pizza Hut. Lenin may be rolling in his grave for his work to fold to Western culture, but at least his people will enjoy the wonders of unhealthy fast food for the ensuing future.